So be honest, how many times have you, like, walked out of a deeply frustrating meeting, maybe vented to a work friend and muttered the phrase, I just don't do office
Oh,
politics?
I mean, we've all done it. And you probably said it with a little bit of pride, too.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Hmm.
you're wearing a badge of honor for staying above the fray. Like you're keeping your hands clean while everyone else is, wrestling in the mud.
Right. It's a completely natural reflex. We say it, and we feel uh, this immediate flush of moral superiority.
Mm,
Because when we tell ourselves, I don't do politics, what we're really saying is, I don't manipulate, I don't scheme, I don't compromise my core values just to get a promotion.
right. It feels like this very principled, ethical stand.
It does. It really does.
But, and this is what we're getting into today, we have a new article from the Phoenix Performance Partners. It's titled Integrity and Influence, Shaping Culture Without Playing Politics. And it completely dismantles that comforting narrative.
Yeah, it really tears it down.
I mean, the core argument suggests that wearing your little I don't do politics badge might actually be destroying your career. And honestly, worse than that, it could be severely damaging your company's culture.
Which is a tough pill to swallow. But the authors, they root this entire paradigm shift in this fantastic quote from Thomas Jefferson. He said, in matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand like a rock.
I love that quote.
It's great. And the mission of our deep dive today is to really examine that. Like, is your refusal to engage in workplace dynamics actually you standing like a rock on principle? Or, and this is the uncomfortable part, are you simply abandoning your responsibilities?
Wow. Yeah, because the text makes a very compelling case that passivity does not actually protect your integrity.
No, not at all. It just surrenders your influence to the people who are, frankly, more than happy to use theirs.
Right. I was thinking about it like taking your hands off the steering wheel of a moving car just because you don't like navigating heavy traffic.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right, because refusing to drive defensively doesn't magically transport you out of the traffic jam. You're still in the car.
You're just sitting in the passenger seat now.
Exactly. You're letting everyone else on the road dictate where you end up. Or worse, you're letting a crash happen that you could have easily, steered away from. Taking your hands off the wheel isn't taking the high road, it's literally just giving up control.
That is exactly what happens. And that transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat, it happens because of a fundamental and honestly dangerous confusion
Mm.
between two very different concepts.
Which are politics and influence.
Yes, politics and influence. We cannot change our behavior until we realize we've been operating with entirely wrong definitions for these two words.
We conflate them.
Exactly. We conflate the toxic behaviors we hate with the necessary behaviors required to actually get anything done.
So let's get grounded here, because I think we need to separate these concepts clearly. What exactly are the authors defining as the toxic stuff, the politics part?
Right. So politics, in the context of this research, is all the behavior nobody actually wants in a healthy environment. It's the manipulation.
The backstabbing.
Exactly. The hidden agendas, hoarding information just to maintain power over someone else. It's gossiping, playing favorites, or even just flattering someone. Saying what a senior leader wants to hear instead of what's actually true, just to get close to power.
Just to climb the ladder. Yeah, and if you say you want to avoid those specific behaviors, you're totally justified. Like, that is a toxic way to operate.
100%. Nobody is arguing you should do that. But the article draws a really sharp line between that toxic behavior and actual influence.
Right.
And it defines influence as something everyone inherently possesses and something everyone desperately needs to use.
So how do they define it then?
Influence is the act of understanding how decisions actually get made. It's building genuine, trusting relationships across different departments. It's learning to communicate your ideas effectively so they resonate with different stakeholders. And it's navigating competing priorities without losing your integrity.
Notice the vast mechanical difference between those two things.
Oh, it's night and day. One relies on deception and manipulation. The other relies on empathy, clarity, and leadership.
And what's absolutely crucial for you to understand here is that leadership in this context has nothing to do with your job title.
Nothing at all.
The tragedy of the modern workplace is that most people look at the messy human work of influence, the effort it takes to build a relationship or understand someone else's priorities, and they mislabel it as politics.
Right, they see it as dirty work.
Yeah. So they just opt out of the whole system.
Which brings up the concept of relational capital, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we hear that corporate buzzword thrown around a lot.
Constantly.
But the cost of opting out, really comes down to the mechanics of that capital. Let's say you refuse to build relationships outside your immediate team because it feels too, quote-unquote, political.
Okay, I'm with you.
Well, what happens when company budgets get slashed? The manager next to you, who has been having coffee with the finance director, the one who actually took time to understand the finance team's constraints, they can advocate for their department in a language finance capital actually understands.
Right, because they built the bridge.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So their team gets saved, your team gets blindsided by cuts, and then what do? You blame office politics.
Wow. Yeah, you weren't defeated by backroom politics in that scenario.
No.
You were defeated because you had zero relational capital. You never did the work to understand the ecosystem you operate in. You were just sitting in the passenger seat.
Precisely. You were just along for the ride.
Right. I have to jump in here because I think a lot of people listening are going to have a very valid objection to this.
Sure, lay it on me.
Okay, let's say I am a junior developer or an entry-level analyst. I don't have a leadership title. If I'm working in an environment that is genuinely toxic, sticking my neck out feels like career suicide.
Absolutely. It's terrible.
Isn't keeping my head down, doing my spreadsheets, and just surviving a perfectly valid strategy? I mean, why on earth should I step into the fray?
It is a very human survival instinct to want to keep your head down.
Yeah.
And look, in truly abusive environments, survival is sometimes the only immediate goal you can have.
Right.
However, the source text counters this broad mindset by pointing out a really hard truth. Spectators do not change cultures. They just complain about them.
Oof. That's blunt.
It is. You might feel safe in the short term by hiding in your spreadsheets, but you are guaranteeing that you will forever be at the mercy of the culture swirling around you.
So you're just a victim of whatever happens.
Exactly. The authors emphasize that every single interaction is a chance to exert influence. When you, as a junior developer, ask a clarifying question in a meeting that prevents a mistake, that's you influencing.
That makes sense.
When you notice a colleague struggling and you help them think through a problem, you are influencing.
Okay, I buy that passivity is dangerous and that even small actions shape the culture. But it is incredibly hard to shake the feeling that stepping into that messy dynamic makes you somehow complicit in it.
Yeah, that fear of getting your hands dirty.
Exactly. If influence is so essential and we all inherently have the capacity for it, what is the psychological safety blanket keeping so many smart, capable people stuck in the passenger seat?
Well, that brings us to what the article identifies as our internal psychological traps. They call them default success strategies.
Default success strategies.
Basically, these are our professional comfort zones. And they're particularly insidious because they trick our brains into believing that our passivity is actually a moral strength.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The text outlines several of these psychological profiles, and the first one is the illusion of the pure meritocracy.
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah. If you fall into this trap, your comfort zone is absolute control over your own work. You genuinely believe that the best ideas should always win purely on their own merit.
So this is the person who thinks, the code speaks for itself, or the data is obvious.
Exactly.
They come up with this brilliant game-changing strategy. They drop the slide deck on the boardroom table, and if people don't magically recognize its brilliance immediately, they just fold their arms and walk away.
Yep. They refuse to sell the idea because they think selling it diminishes its value. Like, if it's good, I shouldn't have to convince you.
Right. But really, it's just a defense mechanism.
It's a massive defense mechanism for the ego. Because if you just drop the idea and walk away, and the company rejects it, you don't have to face the fact that maybe you lack persuasive skills.
You can just tell yourself, well, they just don't get it. They aren't smart enough.
Precisely. You protect your ego, but your great idea just dies in a drawer somewhere.
What a waste. What's the next trap?
Another massive psychological trap is the desperate need for connection and safety. This one is driven by our evolutionary fear of conflict.
So prioritizing being liked over being effective.
Right. If this is your comfort zone, you avoid anything that even mildly resembles positioning or disagreement.
Yeah.
You don't want anyone to think you're being aggressive or, quote unquote, political.
So what does that actually look like in practice, the mechanism of it?
Right. You stay completely silent during strategic high-stakes conversations. You just nod along.
Just trying to blend into the wallpaper.
Exactly. And the real-world result is that you and your team get entirely left out of important decisions. You end up being assigned unmanageable workloads or weekend shifts because you never raised your voice to defend your team's capacity.
Wow. So you kept the peace, but you totally sacrificed your team's well-being.
Exactly. Which, by the way, sounds very similar to another trap the article mentions, which is the forced march toward harmony.
The forced march toward harmony, that sounds exhausting.
Oh, it is.
Right.
But instead of just staying quiet, this person actively tries to eliminate all friction. They're the ones running the endless committee meetings, terrified of moving forward until every single person holds hands and agrees.
Oh, I've worked with that person. They try to smooth over every difference of opinion, which means absolutely zero momentum ever happens.
Right. By refusing to make a hard call that might upset just one person, they stall the entire organization. It's the sacrifice of progress for a false sense of peace.
That is so frustrating.
It really is. But there's one more major comfort zone the authors highlight, and honestly, it is perhaps the most common among highly intelligent professionals.
Okay, what is it?
It's the shield of analysis and accuracy.
Oh, now wait a minute. Here is where it gets really interesting because I'm going to push back on this one.
I figured you might.
As someone who loves diving deep into research, reading all the footnotes, gathering evidence, wanting all the facts before making a move seems like a massive advantage. How can a drive for accuracy possibly be a bad thing?
Well, the drive for accuracy isn't inherently bad. The problem is how it's weaponized as an excuse for inaction.
Weaponized how?
People trapped in this comfort zone endlessly study the organizational landscape. They demand 100% complete information before they will commit to a stance.
Ah, I see.
The mechanism at play here is using data gathering as a literal shield to avoid engaging in the unpredictable, messy human reality of decision-making.
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly. Imagine you're tasked with choosing a new software vendor for your department. You spend 3 months building the perfect matrix, analyzing 20 different vendors, reading every single review.
Sounds like a very thorough job.
It is. But you never talk to the procurement department about their timeline.
Oh, no.
Yeah. By the time you finally emerge with your perfect, undisputed recommendation, procurement already signed a multi-year contract with a mediocre vendor a month ago because they had a deadline to meet.
Wow, so your accuracy didn't save the company owl.
Nope. It just ensured you weren't in the room when the actual choice was made.
That is incredibly sobering. So whether your psychological shield is the illusion of meritocracy, the fear of conflict, the forced consensus, or analysis paralysis, the result is identical.
You're sitting in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
You're spectating.
And you forfeit your right to complain when the culture doesn't reflect your values.
Exactly.
But that creates a paradox, right? If we know we're trapped in these comfort zones, how do we actually break out of them? How do we exert influence without feeling like we're turning into the manipulative politicians we despise?
Well, the source material offers a profound framework for exactly this.
Yeah.
And it requires balancing two concepts that corporate culture often treats as mutually exclusive:
Which are?
truth and care. They call the core practice direct with love.
Direct with love. Okay, I want to make sure we don't let that phrase just sound like a, cheesy motivational poster. We need a functional analogy for this.
Good idea.
So to me, balancing truth and care direct without love is like a sledgehammer. And love without directness is a marshmallow.
Oh, I like that.
Right, the sledgehammer is harsh and alienating. People might think you're honest, but no one actually listens because you're just smashing things.
Right, they're too busy putting up their defenses.
Exactly. But the marshmallow love without directness is just nice, but entirely ineffective. Everyone likes you, but nothing changes. You're just soft.
Yes. So we're looking for that sweet spot where you tell the truth, but in a way that actually builds the bridge instead of burning it down.
Exactly. So what are the specific actionable steps from the Phoenix Performance Partners article? How do we use the perfect tool that isn't a sledgehammer or a marshmallow?
Okay, the authors lay out a specific playbook, and it starts with the absolute foundation. You have to build relationships before you actually need them.
But, okay, how do you do that without it feeling incredibly gross and transactional?
What do you mean?
Like, if I randomly schedule a coffee with the head of IT, isn't it glaringly obvious I'm just networking so they'll approve my hardware request next quarter?
Well, it will feel transactional if your intent is transactional.
Okay, fair.
The mechanism to avoid that is genuine curiosity. You don't ask them to coffee to talk about your future needs. You ask them to coffee to understand their current reality.
Oh, I see.
You ask things like, what are the biggest bottlenecks your team is facing right now? How does my department usually make your life harder, and how can we stop doing that?
You're mapping the ecosystem.
Exactly. You're learning what constraints they operate under so that when you do need to collaborate later, You already understand their perspective.
Which ties perfectly into understanding how decisions actually get made,
Yeah.
rather than how they are supposed to get made, like the formal org chart versus the informal network.
Yes, that is a huge part of the playbook. The formal org chart is just a piece of paper. It tells you who holds official authority.
That's not how things actually work.
Right. The informal network is the living, breathing reality of how things happen. For example, the formal org chart might say the vice president of engineering has to sign off on your new software tool. But the informal network reveals that the VP hasn't written a line of code in 5 years and secretly relies entirely on a senior staff architect named Sarah to vet every single technical decision.
Ah. So if you spend 3 months crafting a pitch for the VP and completely ignore Sarah.
Your project is dead on arrival. You have to understand the informal flow of trust to be effective.
Okay, so let's say I've done that. I've mapped the informal network. I know exactly who I need to talk to. How do I actually get, say, the operations team to care about my creative marketing project without sounding like a corporate sellout who's abandoning my creative vision?
Well, you do it through translation.
Translation.
Yeah. The article emphasizes that speaking to what matters to your audience is not manipulation. It is a profound sign of respect. Different departments naturally value different metrics because they're judged on different metrics.
So you aren't changing your core idea at all. You're just changing the lens through which they view it.
Precisely. If you are pitching a wild, innovative, creative project to operations, do not spend 20 minutes talking about brand resonance and, aesthetic emotional impact.
Since they don't care about that.
Right. Operations is judged on risk, feasibility, and efficiency. So you translate your pitch. You explain how the new creative process will actually streamline the workflow, reduce vendor revisions by 20%, and decrease the load on their project managers.
Oh, wow.
You're advocating for the exact same creative project, but you're doing the hard work of speaking their language, rather than demanding they learn yours.
That makes total sense. But what happens when you do all that translating and the priorities just literally clash?
Like a direct resource conflict?
Yeah. My team needs the budget to launch the product in Q3, and the finance team has a mandate to freeze all spending until Q4. There is no translation that fixes a direct conflict of resources.
No, there isn't. And that is where being direct using truth and care is most vital. You name the competing interests openly.
You just acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Yes. Instead of having secret meetings to try and circumvent finance, you go straight to them and say, look, we have a tension here. My team's mandate is to drive Q3 revenue, and your mandate is to restrict Q3 spending.
Both are valid company goals.
Exactly. Both are valid. So you ask, how do we navigate this collision together? By bringing the conflict into the light, you remove the shadow where politics and resentment breed. You invite them to solve a shared problem.
And if the conflict isn't just about resources, but it's a fundamental disagreement with a specific person,
Then you apply the final and often hardest behavior in the playbook. Having hard conversations directly.
directly with them.
Yes. If you disagree with a colleague, especially if they're senior to you, you go to them. You don't complain to their boss. You don't go to your work best friend to build a little coalition of gossip to validate your feelings.
Which is what everyone actually does.
Right. But you shouldn't. You go directly to the person and say, I saw the decision made in that meeting differently. Here's my perspective, and I genuinely want to understand the context of why you made that call.
That requires immense courage.
It does. But it's the ultimate expression of respecting someone enough to challenge them to their face.
So we've explored the dangerous definitions we use, the psychological comfort zones that paralyze us, and the specific mechanics of how to engage directly and empathetically. But the authors of this article leave the reader with an ultimate litmus test to bring all of this crashing into reality.
They do. It's a great question.
They ask you to look in the mirror the next time you're tempted to throw your hands up and pull the I don't do politics card and ask yourself one brutally honest question.
And that question is, am I avoiding this engagement because it actually violates my deeply held moral values? Or am I just avoiding it because it feels socially uncomfortable and I'm slapping the word principle on my own discomfort?
Oof. That is an absolute gut punch to anyone who has been hiding in the passenger seat.
It really calls you out.
Because if doing the work of mapping the informal network feels quote-unquote political to you, that isn't an ethical crisis. That's just your fear of stepping outside your spreadsheet.
Exactly.
If learning to translate your creative vision into an operational workflow feels like playing games, that is not an integrity problem. That's an influence gap. You are just avoiding the hard work of communication.
Real integrity in the workplace means doing the deeply uncomfortable, messy, human work of relationship building.
Hmm.
And you do it not to manipulate, but because you actually care about the mission of your organization and the well-being of the people you work with. You simply cannot serve them if you refuse to engage with them.
You can definitely get your hands off the steering wheel. It feels safer in the passenger seat, at least for a while.
Sure does.
You can sit there and complain that the driver is reckless, that the game is rigged, and that the company culture doesn't respect your brilliant ideas. Or you can take the wheel. You can learn the terrain, build the trust, communicate in a language people actually hear, and use your influence to shape the culture around you.
And if we pull all of these psychological and practical threads together, it raises one final lingering question that extends even beyond the mechanics of the article.
Okay, what's that?
It's a reality check for anyone who thinks staying out of the fray is the moral high ground. Think about this. If every single person with high moral integrity decides that office dynamics are simply too dirty and complicated to engage with, who exactly does that leave in charge of shaping the future of your company?
Wow, it leaves the people who don't care about playing dirty.
Exactly.
So don't surrender your influence to them. Grab the steering wheel, step out of your comfort zone, and start navigating with both courage and care. That is our deep dive for today. Keep learning and keep engaging.